Okay, I'm back, and I finished making the little tuck spots that I was making in the previous video, and I stitched one to this pocket, or to this page. I already had one stitched to the other page, which I don't have right here with me. So I just used a straight stitch and sewed around there. And before I turned the camera back on, I cleaned the glue and the fibers off my fingers. They were covered with cheesecloth fibers and eyelash trim fibers. They're pretty clean right now. So I just put the tuck spot in the corner of the page and then stitch down the side and across the bottom to make a tuck spot. The glue has dried, so I can stitch without getting my needle sticky. So there we go. And when I use pattern paper, I like to provide a lot of writing space in journals. So on the pattern paper is where I make tuck spots and pockets so that you can put something in there to journal on. And sometimes I just can't have, too many pockets because then your book becomes too bulky. So I took this DCWV 8x8 pad that I've had for a while, maps, text, and ledgers, and I just have the ledger papers in here right now. I took everything else out. So I trimmed pages to fit there. So I will just use my ATG tape to stick down the ledger paper so that there will be a space for journaling. And when I do leave pattern paper pretty much free, then you could glue down pictures or memorabilia, other kinds of ephemera that you might have. And sometimes I like to decorate, just collage on the page and just leave it as a decorative page. They don't all have to be functional, but I try to make most of them with at least a little bit of journaling space. And so in the pockets, I have this piece that I printed. I found it on Pinterest, a little black and white photo of a little girl in school, probably in the 30s or 40s. I love that picture. And I stitched it to some coffee dyed tracing paper, and I'm just going to tuck that right in there. So that's a little journaling card. And then for this one, I'm going to take one of the Mrs. Coggs images, and I take my scraps of coffee dyed paper that I cut off. I just put a little strip of tape down the middle of it and stick it on the paper. Got to get my paper cutting scissors because I don't want to use my fabric scissors for cutting paper. That's a big no-no. I'm sorry if I bumped the camera. And then I just trim it around the image that I stuck down there, and then I will stitch around the edges. So I don't put tape around the edges where the stitching will be. So I think I'll use the zigzag here, just because I like the zigzag. I like the way it looks. And there we go. This was printed onto cardstock, so you could have journaled on the back of it, but it was white, so I stitched it to coffee dyed paper. I could have used distress inks to distress it, but often I print them on regular weight printer paper, and so then I stitch them to coffee dyed paper and it gives them a little more weight. And to finish decorating the patterned side of this paper, I'm just going to make a fabric flip right there. So again, I've got my little box of scraps, which is getting a little bit messy now because I've been pawing through it to do this project. But I'm going to look for some fabrics that I think I like here. This is one of my favorite scraps of fabric that I have with the birds. I love the colors and I love the birds. This doesn't really look like a vintage pattern, but I like these colors with this paper. So I am going to use this fabric. I want to make sure I get a full bird in there. And I don't want it to be too wide, so I'm gonna make it a little narrower, so I'll cut off this side on the other side of the bird. And trim a little off the top. Normally, this is called fussy tearing. I'm not fussy cutting, I'm fussy tearing, but I'm kind of centering the bird in this piece of fabric. Normally I don't have to do that, but because I want that image in there, so I like that. And just want something small up here so I don't cover up the bird. Maybe that piece. Yeah, so I'll just put this little piece up here. Oh, it's bigger than I thought. It was folded. And I'll probably put a little lace on it. So let me see what kind of lace I have. I'll just use this one that came from Hobby Lobby. Just a small piece. Just right over there. So this is a little bit different than the flips I usually do because of the bird image. But I do different kinds. They're not all the same. So I will stitch that down with a zigzag stitch. I like doing the fabric flips for a lot of reasons. One is fabric was my first crafty love. I used to do a lot of sewing and a lot of fabric crafts, and now I love, and I always loved paper too, but now I've discovered so many ways to craft with paper, and you can combine paper and fabric together. So that's one reason I like combining patterns and colors of fabrics and papers. Another reason is it just makes a beautiful page and also gives you a place to write because you can flip it up and write underneath it, and you don't lose journaling space, and you still have a lovely decoration on your page. So there's that one. Oh, there's one more thing I want to do to these pages, and that is to, this one has a little piece of fabric as a tab. So I want to put a tab on these pages. So out comes my little scrap box again. Maybe I'll just do this coffee dyed muslin piece. It's the selvage edge, so it's not going to fray on that side, but I don't mind. Gives it a different look on that edge. So I will just fold it over and stick it on here where I want the tab. see me now? And I'll zigzag it on. So there it is. I could leave it like that. It's a loop kind of because it's open there, but I like to stitch across the top so it's not an open loop. Which there's nothing wrong with having it looped. I just like mine to be flatter. And I like the decorative look of adding a little more stitching. I have done it where I've done several rows of stitching across there, just to give it a more decorative look. So there we have the tab. So this page is complete. I'm going to leave this as it is for journaling. Maybe add a rubber stamp. I don't know. Sometimes I just leave it plain. So let's pick out fabrics for this flip. What do I have in here that would be nice? Nothing is jumping out at me. Maybe this one. So this one doesn't have an image, a picture that I want to preserve, so I can go ahead and put a bigger piece on top of it, or I could collage little patches on it. I've done it both ways many times. I think I'll take some of this gray gingham. Oop. Oh, it doesn't want to tear. And let's see, I'll put that on there and make it a little shorter than that one. So I would stitch that on there, and I could put lace or trim or ruffled fabric or anything across the top. Oh, we're at 12 and a half minutes. I think I'm going to do a ruffled fabric so I can show you how I do that. So I've got some strips of fabric in here somewhere. I'm making a big mess of my box. In between projects, it's all organized, so the strips are together and the squares are together. Here's the strips. Let's try this one. Just a white with little pink flowers on it. So I cut it a little bit longer than I want because I'm going to gather it. And I will set my machine on a straight stitch with the basting stitch, the longest stitch. And do not back stitch. Just stitch down the center of your strip of fabric. Make sure you leave a long enough thread so you can pull. Then I take one of the ends of the thread and just pull it, and it gathers up the fabric. Sometimes if your piece of fabric is longer, you'd pull it from one end and then pull it from the other end too. And then you can kind of spread your gathers out just the way you want them. When you're doing clothing, you want it to look, the gathering to be evenly spaced, but for junk journals, I like it when they're not evenly spaced. So I could cut it so that it doesn't go all the way across, so it's just partially across. I think, don't think I want it to go all the way across on this one. But if I cut it, then I'm going to cut off the threads that are gathering. So what I'll do is I'll just start stitching right here and then cut it off after I'm done stitching. It's going to go pretty much all the way across anyway. I like to use a gathering or a zigzag stitch let me show you how I line this up. I have these fabrics right to the top of the page, and then this I put so it hangs off the top a little bit, so you get kind of a ruffle off the top of your page. And then I will stitch with a zigzag stitch right down the center to stick it on, so you make sure that the center is still on the page. You could sew the flaps down first and then add the gathered ruffle, so you can see me, because it might be easier to handle that way, but I like doing things the quick way. Of course, if you have to do a lot of fussing to try to handle everything together, then that might not be the quick way, especially if you're not used to it. So if you're new at doing this sort of thing, I would suggest sewing down the flaps first and then doing the gather on top. So there's that. Now all I need is a tab. And I think I'll just use this green. This is a not really a matchy journal, so I don't have to try to, you know, use pink on the pink page and all that. It's a very eclectic look, although it is themed. It's a schoolhouse theme, vintage schoolhouse. But we can pretend that all these different patterns and fabrics are all the different calicos that the children wear to school. So I'm going to put it down here. I don't put the tabs in the same spot on the pages, of course, because you want them to alternate. There we go. So I just did these 2 pages for this journal, and this one had already been done. This one has lace at the top and some fabric flaps. And so this set of pages was more, had more work to do on it, because I had this tuck spot to create, and then all the sewing to do, and the sewing on these cards. Also, this has a scrap of, well, let me do that for you too. That's just another scrap of paper, coffee dyed paper. So maybe I would take that, and I don't have really room to spread this out, but I'll just trim it down a little bit. And I think I'll just fold it the long way like that. See how it fits in the pocket. I'll put it in this one. That fits nicely. So then, it's not very even. Must be that one side wasn't trimmed evenly before, so I'm just going to trim that a little bit. So then while it's folded, I take my corner puncher and punch. They still don't match up very well. Punch the corners. Those are the outside corners. I'm just making them line up so they both get punched right. And then the folded corner, see that right there? I punch that too. So then you get that look. Can you see that? And then just tuck it in there and you have more journaling. So these pages are complete. On to the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.